today when they win. I'll get on that.
You bet Temple?
Yeah, they got the
No, it's
7.
not my birthday, and you're at my alma mater. I need to go switch my hat to a have a Penn
They're gonna
State
win.
shirt
I'm
on.
convinced they're gonna win
Hell
today.
yeah, Temple Isles.
Forrest Brock.
Yeah. Is he even playing?
I doubt it.
Okay, I was gonna say I thought the other guy was in there, but I don't even care. Uh, All right, friends, it's that time again. Little Saturday, live before lock here at Stochastic College Football Edition. You guys know what we got to do. A lot of games to break down. We're going to talk about the slate, 13 of them on DraftKings. We're going to answer your questions. We're going to dive into the projections, the tools, the ownership. We're going to have some fun along the way. We'll sneak in some bets, talk about Bet365 and tails and all that good stuff. I want to welcome you in, though. I see everyone's ready. We already got a good viewership. Let's start. Let's get the likes up. Let's get going, because yesterday I stayed up till all hours of the night watching what they call football. Washington State and San Jose State. We all lost in that game. There were no winners. But sir, I'm bringing you in. Matt Gajewski, of course, joins me. How are we feeling? You said before the show, tricky little slate we've got on our hands.
Indeed, quarterback is poor. Everyone is parked in this like salary range, no matter what your talent level is. They're all a little expensive, but it's still not as tight as last week. Basically, all the value comes at wide receiver. There's a couple running backs that are a little too cheap. They're not near the minimum, but they're value enough. So I still think context-wise, with the value we have, it's probably a prudent move to play 2 QBs in your lineups, one at Superflex, just because you have the extra salary. But man, I don't feel good clicking 2 of really any of these quarterbacks. So that's kind of the layout of the slate. And like last week, man, FanDuel is a ton of fun again. Make sure you're playing on FanDuel too, because they price it a little looser. You can build some absolutely awesome lineups over there. It's just fun. So if you don't play, at least like throw a lineup on FanDuel.
Got to do it. And we're gonna make some time for FanDuel when we go position by position. You mentioned some of the options. I wanted to ask you, it doesn't look too bad. There's a couple, particularly the Cam Rising situation injury-wise. How much news is really in limbo as we try to build out our slate here?
There's a little bit. Bayshul Tootin is questionable for Virginia Tech. That would open Malachi Thomas. That's a late window game, unfortunately. You have Cam Rising, of course. He's allegedly going to play. It's an injury to his throwing hand, so there's a lot of questions about aggravation, efficiency. Is it full Cam Rising? This is basically their Super Bowl. I mean, this is the best game of the slate. One of these teams is decently likely to win this conference. These are 2 of the top 3 preseason odds in the Big 12. So, I mean, this is a massive game. I understand why he's trying to play. It's just we don't know the efficiency level with him. But I do think he suits up, barring something crazy. Just not sure what level Cam Rising we're going to get. Outside of that, there's Colson Loveland, Tyler Morris. I'm not sure we're playing any Michigan pass catchers to begin with, but there are a couple other names to mention. Everyone else is kind of just in the periphery. Titus Mokia Atamalala from UCLA that might open like a cheap J. Michael Sturdivant, but it's not really any marquee injuries outside of Rising and then Bayshul Tootin.
Want to get into it? Should we go to quarterbacks?
Let's go to quarterbacks. Let's figure this out.
Here we go. All right. Well, I guess if we're going to figure it out, we're going to have to I'm going to actually start with this 7K range, because that's where the ownership is coming in. When I look at some of these names and Riley Leonard and some of these players look to be very popular. Now the slate is interesting. There are some big spreads on here. There's no doubt about it. You've got couple Miami of Ohio is on the slate. Marshall is on the slate. Even NC State is a sizable underdog. And some of the quarterback ownership is coming from those type of games. When you look to quarterback, Halen Green, Riley Leonard, Tyler Show, what do you think are the priorities on this slate?
I don't know if there's any priorities. If you're playing cash, I think it's Halen Green and Tyler Shug, and I don't feel good about either of them. I feel better about Shug because the guy is just about as old as Cam Rising and Alan Bowman. I'm sure you have all seen that graphic. Shug has been in college since 2018. He originally started with Oregon, if you can believe that, all the way back. And he's just been hurt every single year. But when you actually like compile all of his statistics over a long body of work, he has really good efficiency numbers. And I think he's a pretty good fit in Louisville's offense. He can run. He has negative rushing yards so far this year, but they played an FCS team in Jacksonville State. Their combined margin of victory, I believe, is 111 to 14. Like they almost have 100 points ahead of their opponent so far. And Shug has the skill set to run this like Brom-led offense. He can move. And we saw them use like even Jack Plummer occasionally last year on designed runs. And then air raid style stuff, he's certainly a competent passer. So I think there is a little bit of meat left on the bone with Shug because what have they shown? They haven't needed to really do anything in their offense so far. He's not priced as expensive as he should be. Just if you were to kind of price a Louisville quarterback, name aside, whoever it is, this is a very friendly offense for DFS and fantasy purposes. So he's my favorite. Green, I have a lot of talent questions. His efficiency numbers look great so far, but he's also played Arkansas Pine Bluff and Oklahoma State, who has a secondary outside the top 100. Their most recent game against UAB, he looked terrible. The only thing with him is you have such a good rushing floor. He's averaging over 60 yards per game. He had 15 designed attempts in the last 2 games. That floor is going to give you a solid baseline statistical line for DFS. I just am not sure the ceiling is there. Auburn's defense is the strength of their team. So I kind of question the ceiling with him, and I'm debating coming in a little underweight for tournaments and just low risk stuff, playing him there, cash, playing him there, small field. I think that's okay. But I have Taylor Green questions.
So the interesting thing about this slate, when you look at quarterback in terms of pricing, the top 2 come from the same game in Sam Levitt and Baron Morton. It's not a game where the total is out of control. It's healthy. It's pushing almost 60. They're not projecting as popular plays. Do you think that's warranted, or do you think that these are tournament plays for large fields that you could actually get to?
Baron Morton, I have a lot more interest in with the air raid offense. Texas Tech runs, they're passing 60% of the time. I don't really fear Arizona State's defense. They've played a bunch of cupcakes so far, and I don't think Barron's going to give you much running, but there are a ton of injuries in Arizona State's secondary. Most of their starters are intact, but they have absolutely zero depth. They lost their nickel this week. So I think there should be avenues to throw the ball for Texas Tech. Pace should be pretty good. Total's decent. It's just shy of 60 points. Morton is a little more expensive than the previous quarterbacks we mentioned. So I certainly would prefer them if you made me just pick one. But I don't think the gap is that wide. And Morton was a guy I did try to actively boost because of the stacks you can make with him. Levitt, I just don't know what to make of this guy. He has 24 attempts per game. Arizona State is throwing 35% of the time. You would think that increases because they're finally an underdog. He's just been bad as a passer. His floor is awesome. He's averaging just over 50 rushing yards per game, but I'm not sure you can really access a ceiling with him. I don't think he should be the most expensive quarterback. I don't think it's even close, really. So I would rather play Morton 1-for-1, and I have a lot more interest for tournaments just with the ceiling he accesses.
When you look at the other 8K options, you've got some big names there. Certainly Bowman appears on every slate. We talk about him every week. Will Howard's kind of been an afterthought, and it's because they've played Akron and Western Michigan, but is Marshall that much different? And I'm talking about Ohio State, of course. Then you've got Cade Klubnik as well against NC State, and they're a healthy favorite. When you look at those 3, is it Bowman 1, or do you think one of the quarterbacks in the big blowout games actually makes sense?
I'd rather play Will Howard, just accessing that electric team total. They've still been passing the ball a ton. And I think that makes sense because they're breaking in 2 new receivers, Carnell Tate, the second-year player, and Jeremiah Smith, the freshman. They just need to get these guys reps for when games actually start counting. You don't want to throw like Jeremiah Smith into Big Ten action without any reps. They obviously have the veteran Ibuka. He's still been playing a fair amount too with his leadership. But I think they're going to continue throwing. They've been beating the snot out of everybody and still throwing a fair amount. So Will Howard is fine. They will take their foot off the gas at the end, but if they do score all their touchdowns through the air, he should be more than enough to get there. And if Marshall does keep this close, Will Howard has great mobility. He just hasn't needed to show it. I doubt he needs to show it here, but it is in his bag. I don't have a lot of interest in Klubnik. I just don't know what kind of ceiling you're getting. NC State, since Grayson McCall has been playing terrible and then subsequently got hurt, they reduced their pace all the way to 132nd. Clemson's not fast either. The total in that game is minuscule. They will take the air out of the ball and hide Klubnik, which has benefited them in games so far this year. If Klubnik is dropping back like 40 times, Clemson's probably losing a game. So I'm not sure you're really accessing the ceiling with him either. He also doesn't run. So Klubnik, I'm out on. I will play a fair amount of Will Howard. Right now, he's my fourth most owned QB.
Chris Carlton, appreciate that. Any love for Haynes King? You know, Haynes King is a guy, he's attached to the Louisville game. He's projecting right now, we have him around 5% ownership, so it's not going to be anything crazy. And we've seen Georgia Tech, you know, they've been in some games. He's 7,600 on DraftKings. Now, the attempts have been a little all over the map, but I think you need to take, you know, VMI is not a real situation. He threw the ball nearly 40 times against Syracuse, and he had nearly 70 yards rushing there. He's got 3 touchdowns on the ground. Is that rushing upside something we can bank on? And does that put Haynes King in play against a pretty stout Louisville defense?
I'm definitely playing him. I'm not sure how good Louisville's defense is. I'm not saying they're bad. I don't disagree with you or anything. I'm just not sure we have a lot of great data points to really evaluate it. I boosted Haynes King. He's a player I have a lot of interest in instead of the chalk because he's kind of being left for dead. This is a player that had a really high ceiling last year. And you mentioned a couple of the games where they didn't use him. And it wasn't just that game. Against Florida State, they barely threw the ball in the second half because they didn't have to. They just absolutely beat them pillar to post. In competitive games, he has upside to throw like 40 times. He's very mobile. The only concern you really have with him is they do the stupid Taysom Hill, like Zach Pyron stuff on the goal line. Because he's enormous, they'll just QB sneak with him. So if they get to the 1 yard line, Haynes King almost certainly is not going to be rushing the ball in. That's a minor concern for me. And it's not one where he's owned enough where I'm really that concerned. Actively trying to get over on Haynes King. And I realize now I forgot to mention Bowman when you brought him up earlier. I think I was probably underrating Bowman. I don't think he's very good. But when you're throwing to Brennan Presley, Rashad Owens, and Dazon Stribling, I don't think you have to be very good. All you have to do is not throw interceptions. And those guys are going to do a ton of the work for you. I'm still interested in him because they're throwing the ball so much. When you look at the Utah matchup, Utah's down 4 starters in their back 7, 2 linebackers, 2 DBs. Their defense is already not living up to expectations up front. There should be a lot of avenues for Bowman to succeed. The only concern is Rising. Is Utah going to be a willing dance partner? Utah plays faster when Rising's out there. The efficiency is obviously better. And Oklahoma State's defense sucks, so they're constantly in shootouts. I'm just not sure like a Utah freshman signal caller can take advantage of that, whereas Rising certainly can. So I'm hoping we get some pretty decent news. And then that game might be more of a low-key shootout than we're expecting. The last thing on that game is it's the last game on the slate. It's a, 4 p.m. Eastern time kickoff. So it's not even in the 2:30 window. There's no swaps. And I think a lot of people are just kind of ignoring it because there's nothing you can do if Rising's out. You don't have to play a ton of these guys. If you go a little bit of Bowman, a little bit of Rising, you end up above the field. Right now we have Bowman at like 2% ownership. So I think he's fine to play. And he's not the one you're worried about swapping anyway.
No, no doubt about it. And I assume, you know, if you play Rising, you're stuck. You just swap directly to the backup. You have no choice.
Yeah, I mean, you're screwed. You probably just play like one of the running backs, I don't know, and make a 2v2 or something.
Yeah.
You're probably not playing him naked. But I mean, Rising's going to be like less than 1% owned. If you're playing 150 and you have like 2 lineups with Rising, you're over the field. No one's going to click his name. I don't want to click him either. I'm going to have only a handful of lineups. I guess to put a bow on that game, I'm more interested in Bowman coming over the field on him. And then to loop it back to Haynes King, he's another player I will be above the field on at the expense of some of the chalky guys we mentioned at the top.
Last thing before we move to FanDuel, it looks like in terms of like pure value, there's not much there. Like Donovan Smith isn't moving the needle. Garbers, Orgy, I'm not sure I see it for these guys. Do you see it? Or are you saying let's live in the mid to upper 7s or low 8K range?
You should definitely live in the low or like upper 7s, low 8s. The players I'm boosting to actively try to get above the field on at the expense of Green, Shug, and I'm fading the hell out of Riley Leonard today. We didn't talk about him, but
yeah, he's going to be really popular.
He's going to be, I have a feeling he's going to come in lower than we expect just because everyone is talking a lot of BS this morning about him, which I agree with. If he hadn't had a couple long TD runs, he never would have gotten there this year. He's throwing the ball terribly. He's a shoulder injury to his non-throwing shoulder, but it's not helping. He has like a couple long runs and they're taking their foot off the gas. Their pass rate's low. Their pace is slow. They're playing a MAC school. And you can play some of these guys that have a ceiling that we just haven't seen this year. Haynes King, we've seen situationally. I will be boosting Alan Bowman, we mentioned. I'll be boosting Jalen Daniels. He's played terribly as an actual passer, but he's running more than I expected. And I mean, I don't think you could play any worse as a passer. West Virginia has the 127th ranked secondary. So if there was ever a get right spot, it is here for Jalen Daniels. He's coming in sub 5%. Love throwing darts on him. Then on the other side, Garrett Green is another player who's been woefully inefficient as a passer, which is not what he was last year. If you just look at turnover worthy plays, all last year he had 8. This year, he already has 7. We know he's extremely mobile. Kansas's defense, I respect a little more than West Virginia's, but that game has low-key shootout written all over it because West Virginia's defense is so bad. So I'll certainly be boosting Garrett Green, Jalen Daniels, Baron Morton, Haynes King. Those are the players I like from that range at the expense of Shug, Green, especially Riley Leonard. I'm not playing. The only guy you mentioned, really cheap guys, the only guy I would play down here is Garbers. And I don't really like the reason why. Bieniemy is their OC. He's an idiot. He's throwing the ball like every single play. They don't even have a single 100-yard rusher on the year. It's like exactly what we saw in Washington with Sam Howell. They do not have a competent offense, but if you want like 45 attempts playing from behind, Garbers is your guy.
Any thoughts on the LSU quarterback? I know he's kind of in a dead range.
I'm not a Nussmeier guy. I don't think he's very good. Their pass rate's pretty high, but both these teams are playing really slow. 2 paces outside the top 100. The strength of LSU is their O-line in the run game. At some point, I think you're just going to see them lean on the run and stop having Nussmeier throw the ball. This has gotten them in a lot of trouble this year multiple times, and he should have more interceptions than currently what he has in the field. The Achille Arnold against USC play is just mind-blowing to me, but I bring that up every single week.
FanDuel real quick. There are new quarterbacks over there. Castellanos is over there. Kevin Jennings, who looks like, I guess, SMU is kind of settled on giving him the shot. Jackson Arnold, Nico, which is a great game. What are you looking at? I know I just routed off some of the highest owned. It seems like there's a lot of potential big-time players over there.
I'm actively bringing Jennings down, just still worried about the threat of Preston Stone. I know they named Jennings the starter, but I don't think either of them has a particularly long leash. Castellanos is awesome. He's extremely cheap on that slate. Michigan State, they have a ton of players out. Not some of their linemen are out. They lost a couple defenders. 2 of their top 3 receivers are down. They've been taking money, which I'm not sure why. But Castellanos he's actually been really efficient as a passer on top of his running. I love Jackson Arnold over there against Tennessee and perhaps the premier shootout. Iamaleava on the other side of that game, he's an awesome play. Hoover's over there, the 300-yard factory for TCU. Those are some of the players I'm highly exposed to that are different from the DraftKings slate. The only guy who I have like a decent amount of crossover between DraftKings and FanDuel is Taylon Green. And I don't love that.
Yeah, it's not. I bet Auburn, so I'm rooting against Taylon Green today.
I bet him too, so maybe you should play more Taylon Green.
That makes you should manually boost him. Given what the last time I had interest in Auburn, no joke, they threw 5 interceptions, and that got their quarterback benched. That's neither here nor there. Let's move to running backs. Before I do, though, I want to mention right off the bat, we just talked about what we are betting. I already have outrageous, and I'm keeping it focused on college football, but I'll be honest, part of my mind is over in Germany rooting on my soccer teams. I dropped those bets in my Tails Discord this morning. All hell is breaking loose if you want to get inside the ropes at Tails. There's so many great ways to do it, to get access to people like Matt, people like myself, all different content creators. And we have something brand new that I wanted to mention. If you're saying, I'm not sure I want to commit, well, do this. You can get a free month of anyone on the Tails Marketplace just by signing up at one of the books. Mike's going to drop the link. He just did. He's already ahead of the game. If you go to that link, you're going to see all various options for different books. You sign up and click one. You email our support and say, hey, I deposited on BetMGM. Hey, I deposited on whatever site is there. You're in for a month. Great way to do it. An awesome feature. We're super excited to have those link joins. Just a great way to get involved at no expense to you. It's just a win-win for everyone. So come on in. Regardless, those links are below, and let's have some fun, make some money. Let's make some money a running back. Let's see what we've got here. So when I look, obviously I was talking to you before the show and I was saying, man, and he always is expensive, but there's some price. You may have to allocate some salary here, but when I look at the ownership, Phil Maffa is just in a different stratosphere. Is that what you're seeing? And do you think that that's warranted?
I think it's warranted. I'm honestly not sure it's enough. We just have seen Clemson in 2 blowouts. One, they were on the wrong side of against Georgia. In that game, he handled 20 of, was it 22, or he had a 19 of 21 running back opportunities. They were just blown out of the game, so there wasn't really a lot of room for them to be running the ball, playing from a deficit. And then they beat the hell out of App State, where every single walk-on you can imagine carried the ball for them. So I don't think we've seen Phil Maffa in his full role yet. Unfortunately, this isn't sneaking by anybody, except for DraftKings, I guess, because they priced him at 6K. But I mean, he opens the whole slate. He is a decent shot at like 25 touches if this game remains competitive. The spread's not wide enough where Clemson should be able to take their foot off the gas. So he's awesome, man. And then NC State's defense definitely doesn't scare you. They've been really bad this year. They're missing a lot of the players they lost. They're currently allowing 4.6 yards per attempt on the ground. Run defense has been a big issue for them. Maffa should have all the room in the world. And if for whatever reason it remains closer than you think, Maffa's route share was up around 70% against Georgia. So he is clearly the pass catching back. No issues with him whatsoever. I'm going to come in above the field. The only reason I don't like that is from a risk management standpoint. If he does fail, even though that's very, very slim, he's going to tank like 70% of my laps, which is just more of a preference thing than anything else. But he's my most owned player. He should probably be yours too. He's the first guy in your cash lineup.
Yep, that was my next question. I want to ask you kind of, because the interesting thing, Ollie Gordon is priced a couple $1,000s more than everybody else. I'm not saying it's warranted or not. That's not really my question. It's more at that type of price tag. It seems like a pretty big stretch to get those returns. You mentioned the volume that Bowman and those receivers have. Is Ollie Gordon just simply in a price range that renders him almost useless?
Teams are keying in on him. I'm not sure if this will change because Bowman's been slaughtering teams. But I mean, his volume's just not any better than Maffa, Kiner. Most of the other backs that are owned, he doesn't have better volume than them. The efficiency's been worse. This is a tougher matchup than a lot of what Oklahoma State's played this year. He's failed against other teams, like Tulsa took him away. I don't know what Utah's game plan is going to be, but maybe you sprinkle him based on the upside he showed last year. He just doesn't have the same role. He has 17 carries in back-to-back games. Like Taj Brooks has a better role. Scatabo for Arizona State has a better role. This is a price tag that's just wrong. He should not be this expensive.
When we look at like I said, there's a large range here of all different price tags. You mentioned Scatabo, Corey Keener, Taj Brooks, Jarquez Hunter. I want to ask you about him with this new look Auburn team with the quarterback, his role change. When you're looking, we seem to say that Maffa's kind of on an island in terms of preference, but who slides in that next tier of running back options?
My 2 favorites are Scatabo and Brooks. They're expensive, so a lot of lineups, you can't play them both. So I understand if you need to pick one over the other. I would choose Scatabo over Brooks right now. Arizona State is trying to run the ball as much as they can. He's coming off touch counts of 38 and 27. And DeCarlos Brooks was out of one of those games. They did return Raleek Brown. Flip him. Now Raleek Brown's out. DeCarlos Brooks is supposed to be back. I don't think it matters. They're just going to run Scatabo until he gets hurt. So he is an awesome role. With Taj Brooks, they lost Cameron Valdez, their preferred backup. So he does have massive upside as well. In their first game, we saw him with 27 touches. Last game, he was at 17, but that was a blowout against North Texas. You would presume that to be higher here. I think you play at least one of them, 2, if you can make it work. Kiner is very good as well. Cincinnati just doesn't throw to their running backs whatsoever. They have 3 running back targets all season long. So that's a separator between the Arizona and Texas Tech back versus Kiner. But at the same time, he's cheaper. So you kind of make up that difference in role with price. He slides into a lot more lineups because of that price tag. So these are my top 4 backs. I think they're pretty clearly the top 4. I think you probably want 3 of them in cash.
You mentioned at the top of the show, one of the injuries that we're kind of monitoring is Tootin for Virginia Tech. If he sat, would there be a value that would open up, or would that just be like, okay, we're not dealing with that situation?
It would be Malachi Thomas. He's functioned as the lead back at times in the past. He's 4K. The problem is it's a late game, so you just won't have the news. But that could lead you into some pretty nice swaps. There's some expensive receivers that are interesting in the late slate. You could go up to like Presley in a 2v2 or something. The problem is the matchup is not good. Rutgers has a great defense. They returned like everybody from their team last year. They have a couple linebackers that are hurt, but I'm not sure it matters a ton. Even if they're potentially weaker than what we saw last year, both these teams are playing slow. Both of them are playing run heavy. The total is 45, so they're definitely not going to project as well. It would just kind of be like the value statement for Thomas, but unfortunately, it's really hard to click right now.
Would you rather have Hunter or Bernard?
I'd rather have Hunter. I don't feel great about either. They're kind of mixing their roles up a little bit. With Auburn, you have 2 moving parts. You move to Hank Brown, so you presume they run the ball more. But they have more of a committee than you'd like. Like Damari Allison and Jeremiah Cobb will touch the ball. I'm kind of just playing the Hunter situation really close to the vest. Sorry, excuse me. And trying not to like make big stands with him because I think his role might not be quite what we expect, but it might not matter if they run the ball more anyway. So I'm just trying to come in right around ownership, like around 25%. Bernard, I'm not sure either because Mike Mitchell was hurt to start the year. You have the rising stuff, which is going to affect efficiency more than anything. Like they're live to score, I don't know, like 14 points if Rising is injured or limited or doesn't play. But Dejon Stanley, Vincent, Mike Mitchell, those guys all carry the ball a little bit too. I think I prefer Hunter if you made me pick just one. It's close. There's some moving parts with both, which is why I'd rather play like Kiner if you're playing a cash game or something.
I'm going to throw a couple more guys into the mix. I don't expect them to be popular, but they are certainly are on the slate, mid-7s, and that's Devin Neal, who draws a matchup with West Virginia's defense that's just a mess all around. And then Woody Marks for USC. Now, going against Michigan is no joke. Are these guys tournament plays? Are they just so firmly behind Scatterbo at a similar price point and Brooks that they are kind of rendered useless? How do you see that?
No, they're fun tournament plays. Neal especially. Highshaw is still questionable. He's likely to play based on recent reports. When he plays, you see the touch count. Like Neal had 23 carries without Highshaw last week. The game prior to that, it was a 14-7 ratio. So Neal will not likely touch the ball more than 20 times. But, if Highshaw is playing through an injury, perhaps that's higher. Neal is way more efficient. West Virginia's defense is a mess. They're a little stronger up front, but they're still allowing over 4 yards per carry to opposing backs. They should just run the ball with Neal. He's their most efficient player on offense, and it's not particularly close. Who was the other gentleman you mentioned in the 7Ks?
Marks for USC.
Oh, Woody Marks. Yeah,
it's brutal matchup. Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what else to even look to here. Obviously, there's a bunch of names. One guy I actually did want to ask you just because I always think it's interesting when you're talking about blowouts potentially, a lot of touchdown equity. Riley Leonard's getting all this ownership. Is Jeremiah Love then somewhat of a leverage within the team, or is it just a Notre Dame team that we don't want to mess around with in general?
I love Love. He's played in some blowouts and then some competitive games. You'll see Price involved in the backfield, but this is still like a 70-30, 65-35 split. And I don't think you're going to continue to see the Riley Leonard 40-yard touchdowns. He is upside. They're huge favorites. I think he's fine in the 5 range. I'm definitely playing more of the field for Jeremiah Love.
Anything else? I mean, like I said, I'm looking up and down and looking at our tools again, which you can always get as part of get involved here at Stochastic. We've got the best tools in the industry. college football. The link is there. The Sims, single lineup generator, all that stuff. Some of these guys, I've been messing around just to see. There's not that many other, Montrell Johnson's getting some love for Florida. They have to win this game. I do think they're going to win this game. I think he'll be busy. Are there any like punt values? Maurice Turner? I mean, how low do you go? Donaldson?
Maurice Turner, I think, is fine. You haven't seen Louisville play anyone competent, but he's always been the first guy to touch the ball. So just in an uncertain situation, there's a chance he has a better role than we're projecting, and you're not paying for it. He's 4,200. I think he's fine. Donaldson, I do like. West Virginia is just running the piss out of the ball, and he's playing ahead of Jaheim White right now, which a lot of people don't seem to realize. He's sub 5K. That makes some sense. Otherwise, I don't think there's a lot of real value guys to get to. There are players that I want to play that are low owned. You can go down the list. Mononga, I think, makes some sense in a tough matchup against Virginia Tech. You're paying for it, but you only need to sprinkle him. Jamal Haynes, we already mentioned the Georgia Tech situation. They could consolidate in a more competitive game than we've seen. Caden Durham for LSU, they just have not gotten anything out of Jackson and Williams. So he led the team in carries last game. It's still likely to be a three-way committee, but he seems to be running slightly ahead. He's at least been efficient, so he'll have some opportunities. That about does it, though. Jaquindon Jackson would be another pay-up contrarian option, but I'm just really worried about Arkansas facing that Auburn defense.
We'll move to FanDuel. Friend of the show, Ryan Nelson, said, ideal SEC title matchup. I want Texas and Tennessee. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Vanderbilt and Georgia would be awesome. Yeah, Texas is going to be there, man. I think they're the best team. So it's going to be.
I think the most exciting from a fan viewership and DFS perspective would be Ole Miss, Tennessee. It's not going to happen, but it would be nuts.
Ole Miss, quietly, I don't even know what they're doing today.
They haven't been on a slate because they keep playing blind schools.
They play Furman. Every week they play a variation of Furman. And they score 70 points and do what Tennessee did to Kent State. Let's talk about FanDuel here. Let's see what we've got. Clicking over there again. Ownership, a little different, obviously. There's some different guys. But I will say, just to highlight how good Maffa must be on DraftKings, Phil Maffa projects really well over there as well.
And he's 10K.
He's 10K. Yeah. That's nuts.
Yeah, he's an extreme value on DraftKings. He's still one of the best plays on FanDuel, even at that price. And part of that is because other players are really cheap. So it's like you can get to Maffa pretty easily because Damian Martinez is 7,500. And Miami has a semi-competitive matchup against the USF. Cam Cook is 7,600. TCU's been throwing the ball like crazy, but he's on the field like almost every single play. Those two guys are 7.5 and 7.6K. That's egregiously cheap. If you want to go cheaper, Trayshawn Ward, who's worked ahead of Kai Robichaud, 6.2. There's just a ton of value on FanDuel. So you can almost do whatever you want, and it's not hard to get Maffa because you have these other players. Right now, my top three most owned are Maffa, Martinez, and Cook on FanDuel for RB.
Any love over there to pay up for either as a pivot or just a different option in a Dylan Sampson? We don't know exactly how good Tennessee is. I don't think NC State's very good, to be honest. So to me, they've crushed three schools that just cannot compete with them. But I don't know how good Oklahoma is either. Do you think Sampson could be heavily involved tonight?
They're projected to get Selden back, which kind of makes this workload a little more questionable, but he should lead the committee. So I think you could sprinkle him. Right now, I'm at 12% Sampson on FanDuel.
Last question on that. Anything change for Ollie Gordon over there? He's 10,800, so a little more reasonable. But do you have him behind, it would seem, Maffa and Sampson?
Yes, he's behind both of them.
Anything else? Jaden Ott's over there.
Jaden Ott, can we finally figure out if you're playing?
That game. I'm not. This is not going to go philosophical, but it's about growth in life. And I'm not betting Florida State. That is a sign of growth because I bet them into the poorhouse. And I want to bet them today against Cal, and I just simply can't do it. Not doing it. Stay away,
man.
Stay away. I did bet Florida, though. So that's, baby steps. Anyway, anything else that running back here? I think we covered most of it. You mentioned Cam Cook. You mentioned Damian Martinez. Those are two names you're not going to see on the DraftKings slate that just sub 8K definitely open up value.
I have some interest, like a very tepid interest in Trevion Henderson and Judkins. They're not being clicked at all for Ohio State. Not anything more than a sprinkle, but these are two very talented running backs that play for a team that's going to absolutely beat the snot out of Marshall.
Marshall will indeed lose today. I have it on good authority. Let's go to wide receiver, and then we'll talk about certainly again what we got going on, Bet365, and let that answer some questions at the end. And make sure again, if you're watching and you're not subscribed, by the way, we're about to hit 100,000 subs. It's been a long time in the making. It's because of all your guys' support. It's super, super cool. Make sure you're a part of the first 100K. Get inside the ropes now. Just press join here. You don't want to miss out on all the shows. Here we go. So, Ja'Cory Brooks, I mean, 4,800, he jumps off the page. He jumps off the ownership page as well. I assume he is your second man in cash, it would seem. Is that a fair statement? And how good does he really project?
Yeah, he projects awesome. Louisville's first competitive game. He's the clear wide receiver one. He's the Alabama transfer. Everything's been there. Routes, targets. The only hesitation is it's a tougher game, but everything books are telling you suggests you should play him, and this is probably a guy that should be like 6.5K, not 4.8. He's an easy click.
When you go and get him out of the way, I assume that doesn't render other value useless. And what I'm alluding to, I saw the reports yesterday for Florida that Wilson I think he's having some type of surgery. So Badger's going to be, yeah, that's not good. Badger's going to be tasked with really stepping up flat 5. Kevin Coleman on the other side of that game. Jordan Tyson is in the 5s. Malik Rutherford, if you're playing Haynes King, I assume you're going to look to click Rutherford's name here and there. There's other value besides Brooks on this wide receiver slate.
There is other value. The Florida guys are too cheap. They just weren't expecting Eugene Wilson to miss this game. I still want to cap them a little bit. There's a lot of good value plays. I don't want to come in at like really high ownership on Badger or Chimere DK for Florida. You mentioned some of the other players in this range, like Chris Bell's an awesome pivot on the same team as Ja'Cory Brooks. He's the second most route, second most consistent role. I think my two favorite guys in this range are the Georgia Tech receivers. Rutherford is being underprojected across the industry, and I think people just miss that in the game where his routes were limited, he exited with an injury. Every other game, he's been at like 90% of the routes. Singleton has worked slightly behind him this year, but if you go back to last year, Singleton was an absolute stud, so I think you're also buying low on him. Just another reason to like, Haynes King and the Georgia Tech side of this game. They're cheaper, they're under-owned, and they've shown ceilings. So I think they're awesome pivots if you're going for like tournament style plays from this game in this range.
When you look elsewhere, again, because a lot of this has to do with attachments, I assume Bowman, Presley is going to be a guy. Stribling is going to be a guy. Even Owens. I mean, you're comfortable with having, +2, maybe even +3. If you play Will Howard, I assume Jeremiah Smith, who looks to just be unstoppable at 75, is going to be busy. I mean, is it as simple as that when you're pairing up top? I'll go one more. Josh Kelly with Morton. I mean, are these the guys that we clearly want in those stacks?
Yep, you named everyone that you want in those stacks. And a lot of them are going under own because people are playing Taylon Green. So you can get Bowman stacks at much less ownership today. You're paying for them because they've been good, but it's not like we're star for value. A lot of those, like Owens isn't expensive. Then if you play like Phil Maffa and Corey Kiner, like it's pretty easy to get Presley. It's not that difficult today. So I have a lot of interest in those stacks at reduced ownership. Even like Dazon Stripling's 5.9. You mentioned a lot of unique ways to attack the slate. The Ohio State guys are pretty expensive, but like if you want to go to Carnell Tate, who's playing a ton, he's 5.1. Like it's not hard to get these stacks.
Let's see. What do we got here? We got Armstrong and Badger or Kelly and Coleman. Kevin Coleman for DK Cash.
Armstrong and Badger for me.
Yeah, the Florida guys are just really going to be tough. Elijah Badger or Singleton. We'll get there on FanDuel. Let's see. I want to ask you this. So we talked about a lot of the attachments. There are a couple guys, particularly at the top, who I wouldn't really call them it's not that their quarterbacks are unplayable clearly, but it certainly didn't seem like guys that you were getting to. And I'm referring to Lacy and Conception. Are those one-off plays for you, or because of the quarterback play being somewhat concerning, that they're actually guys that you're not getting to, even in stacks that aren't dealing with their teams?
The separation from Lacy, Concepcion down to guys like Badger and Owens is not as wide of a gap as, say, like the same gap you're looking for at running back. So you just get a much higher projected lineup if you do something like Taj Brooks, Phil Maffa, and then go down to Owens versus like playing two cheap running backs and then going up to Lacy. You're sacrificing a lot of projection if you take the Lacy route. So I will fade that for a lot of the reasons that we talked about. Just Concepcion, it's the freshman quarterback playing in Death Valley with the 132nd ranked pace against a pretty good Clemson defense. That's why he doesn't project well. And then with Lacy, they're also really slow. I think at some point they run the ball more. They're getting back Chris Hilton today. I don't think Lacy's a particularly talented player, so I wouldn't be surprised if like Hilton's just better than him right away. I don't know. I think there's more risk with Lacy than we're baking in. And for reference, like I'm not just sticking my personal opinion into the projections. We're like right in line with sports books who have a very good receiving prop on Lacy. And even still, not taking my bias into consideration, he doesn't project well. So if you're as biased as me, like there's room for downside.
That's a beautiful thing about these tools. Again, it's not just us firing, this is intricate stuff, and it allows you to boost, simplify all those good things to inject your takes without ruining what really is some solid baselines. One last guy I wanted to ask you about it, and maybe covering I missed him, would be Xavier Henderson for Cincinnati. I kind of like them in that game. He's a good player. He's 6,700. Feels reasonably priced in terms of the work. Obviously, pretty good start, and he was dangerously busy against Miami of Ohio. Is this a guy that we can get to comfortably, or are there specific concerns?
He's actually my second favorite receiver. I think he has fewer concerns than some of the other chalky pieces. Like all the Arkansas guys, I'm no Taylor Green fan, so I'm actively bringing them down, especially because like Taylor Green probably accesses his ceiling on the ground. So I'm not like sure you want Andrew Armstrong, especially at 6.9K, like please. And Broden, I don't want these guys. Kevin Coleman is playing for Mississippi State. Shaban has good efficiency metrics. That's on the back of horrible opponents. And we just saw them get demolished by Toledo. Now you're playing Florida's defense. Down some guys, yes, Jakeem Jackson, Slackman from their D-line. Florida's backups are more talented than Toledo, so you should have like pretty big concerns. The other thing is they got back Kelly Akari, the UTEP transfer, who this should tell you a lot about Mississippi State. He was kind of like the crown jewel of their transfer class. So anytime the UTEP wide receiver 2 is your crown jewel, maybe your team's not that good. But anyway, he missed week 1 and his routes have been slowly ramping up week by week. There's a chance like Coleman's just not the wide receiver 1 on this team. So I capped all these scrubby offensive receivers at 20%. There's no way I'm coming over the field on Coleman, Armstrong, Broden. These offenses are awful. I don't want any pieces of them above the field.
Are you running Green naked then?
I'm coming in under the field on Green. So okay. I'm not going to be playing it. If I were playing cash, I would run him naked. Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. Best wide receiver, 4,700 or below on DraftKings. Let's see what we can do for you. Obviously, if you can find $100, you can have a lot of good options. Maybe Mason Taylor or Rashad Owens.
It's Owens for me.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Let's talk about FanDuel, then we'll take some questions. And again, if you have questions that we don't get to, at JazzRazBets, at Matt_Gajewski, get into the Discords. Again, sign up no matter what you're doing, whether you're signing up for something over on Tails or you're getting tools here at Stochastic. Hop in the respective Discords. Great information, great communities. You're leaving some value on the table if you're not taking advantage of that. When we look at FanDuel and we look at wide receiver, we see Travis Hunter's name. That's at least who I saw. He jumped off the page. He's $11,000. I assume there's enough value to go get him, or is he someone that is priced out?
He was my second most owned receiver. There's tons of ways to get to him.
Okay.
If he's just the guy you prefer. My favorite receivers over there, Ja'Cory Brooks is also very cheap, but Deion Burks at 8,200, the wide receiver 1 for Oklahoma, really stands out on FanDuel. Dorian Singer is way too cheap. It's just that now you have the rising stuff that make this very, very tricky. Xavier Restrepo, I think, is a solid play over there. Otherwise, there is a lot of overlap here between the DK slate. A lot of the same values like Ja'Cory Brooks. The Arkansas guys pop a little bit. I will not be making big stands with them. Luke Grimm is really cheap over there, I guess, for Kansas. That's someone who's different. But yeah, there's not too many differences at receiver, at least fewer differences than the other positions.
One guy I want to ask you about over there, and it's an interesting game because I actually really respect South Florida. But Miami's, I think Miami might be the actual best team in the country, no doubt about it. And in a game like this, Cam Ward should be busy. And that brings me to Restrepo. He sits at 9,800. He looks like he's getting some decent ownership. What do you think about him? Simple as that.
I like Restrepo a lot. He was one of my more owned receivers when I ran the Sims this morning, and he's a guy that's awesome. Not going to be trying to adjust anything with Xavier Restrepo.
Okay. Yeah, he's a player. Miami's got something going.
He's a player.
He's a player. Which Indiana wide receiver do we like on FanDuel?
They must be on the early slate because I did not do projections for them.
Yeah, just Indiana.
So I don't even know what his price is.
Indiana's got Charlotte. I know that much. And they are 28.5-point favorites. I know that much. So yeah, you're going to be accessing a lot of touchdown equity, but they may be running as they look to get out of there. How would we rank these guys for cash? Kevin Coleman, Badger, Ja'Cory Brooks, or Rutherford? Brooks would be one. I would go Brooks, Badger, Coleman, Rutherford, but that's just me.
I might flip Rutherford and the Mississippi State guy, but otherwise,
okay,
same order. Might.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see, guys. If you have questions, it's that time. We're at the classic 10-minute warning, and I also want to mention there's so much to do. We're building lineups. We're betting games. We're building cards. All of that. You know what's the best way to do it? Bonus bets. And if you're in a state that has Bet365, $200 simply by signing up, depositing, and betting $5. If you win the bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. If you lose the bet, you get $200 in bonus bets. That's what I'm talking about. You can use that to bet parlays. You can use that to bet a single bet. You can use that to change your bankroll. It's very simple. The link is below. You do have to be 21 plus, 18 in Kentucky. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But if you are in a state with Bet365, and all you have to do is click the link to find out if you are, it is absolutely worth a couple minutes of your time to boost your bankroll by $200 via bonus bets. So just wanted to make sure we get that in there. Need some Clemson plays. I don't know, man. Obviously, we know Maffa, but how big is the drop-off to the next Clemson guy?
Well, they're a mess at wide receiver. I think they're going to be... I'm not playing Klubnik. I am somewhat interested in integrating these freshmen. Like TJ Moore's the Stone Min on DraftKings. He had 4 targets in their last game. I know it was against App State. But, I mean, we've seen Antonio Williams, Adam Randall, Troy Stellato. Like, these guys suck. They have 2 elite recruits coming in that barely played against Georgia. It was their first game. I mean, that's somewhat reasonable. But you can get to Bryant Wesco. You can get to TJ Moore. They're probably going to play more down the stretch. It's just like, is that 75% of the snaps or is it 35%? It's volatile, but I would be interested in taking some shots. I'm mainly doing that I believe they're a showdown. I can't remember. Maybe they're not. Anyway, if you are doing it, it would be one of those guys. If not, Antonio Williams would be the best to me. I think Jake Brenningstool is the most consistent. He just falls down every time he catches the ball. I'm not sure what kind of ceiling you're really looking at with Brenningstool to tight end.
Any weather concerns in Colorado? I always look to the totals. I haven't seen anything drastic. I bet Colorado. I'm not looking at anything. I can take another look, but no, I'm fine with it.
Same.
Yeah. Favorite GPP quarterback on DraftKings. Already has King as my first QB. You got a lot of different options there.
Well, you're already really low owned with King, so I don't know if you need to get crazy. I think you could play Shug if you want. If you want to have 2 QBs as your point of differentiation, I would look at some combination of like a Daniels or a Garrett Green or a Baron Morton or a Bowman, something like that. Those are my favorite low-owned QBs, but with Haynes King already in there, I don't think you need to go super crazy.
Yeah, that's somewhat leverage. In itself, 2v2 Badger and Jackson from Arkansas versus Rashad Owens and Manangai on DraftKings.
Man, that's hard. It's probably the former, the first one.
Slim, who was in Norman at college game day, apparently. Give it to me straight, fellas. Can my boys keep it close tonight against Tennessee? Can they? Yes. Will they? No. Too much Nico. If you didn't have injuries on the O-line and in the wide receiver room, I would say yes. I think Tennessee exposes them tonight, to be honest.
I agree. I bet it. I don't want to say mean things to our buddy, though, at game day. I hope for you that they win and you have a great time.
Yeah, I do hope for you, but honestly, after the disgraceful showing of App State, and then Washington State's drunkenness, I really need Tennessee to play well today. So
I need a lot of things.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Jarquez Hunter, FanDuel. Jarquez Hunter and Presley, or Cam Cook and Ja'Cory Brooks. Ooh, I like all those guys, but I'd go the second pair.
I agree.
LSU stack. I mean, I assume if you go to Nussmeier, you're going to Lacey?
Probably. I think some people will go to Mason Taylor. I don't like that, though.
What about a QB +2? Obviously, he's not moving around.
Yeah, just like with Hilton back, the routes are very, very dicey. You don't know what they're going to be. Someone probably stands out, but you're going to have to really take a shot.
Yeah,
that's the only problem is like, who is it? Daniels would be my second favorite, I think, but even that, like, he might lose snaps to Hilton.
Let's see. We got for FanDuel, Armstrong or Lacey at wide receiver?
Lacey.
Can we rank Kiner, Bernard, and Love?
Kiner, Love, Bernard.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, sorry, Slim. It's going to be tough.
It's nothing against Oklahoma. I actually love Jackson Arnold. I'm really excited for the game.
Yeah, where's his receivers? Who's he throwing to? Nobody real.
Nick Anderson's back. At what capacity, we don't know. Allegedly, Angelo Anthony's back. At what capacity, we don't know.
Yeah, where's Farouk?
He broke his foot.
That's right. He's not back. The other guy, I think his name is Gibson. He's not back either. Wide receiver 5.2K and under.
DK?
If it's DK, it's Brooks, is it not?
Yeah, I think so. Pull it up right now.
Let's see.
Brooks,
if it's
DK, Badger.
If it's FanDuel, I would try to rebuild and go get to like Sam Brown or Singer. I don't know, Quentin Skinner. That's not it, man. I don't know if we want to be doing that.
Probably not.
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough scene. A very tough scene. Ben, you said you're betting Auburn -2.5. I did bet Auburn -2.5. Didn't just say it, did it. I believe in this guy, even though I've seen him play New Mexico, and anyone I could look competent against New Mexico. I think at home, that defense is actually going to really cause problems for Arkansas. Anyone from Baylor in play on FanDuel, regardless of position?
No.
No? You're not a believer in Robertson?
Finn might be back.
I talked about that game over on OddsShopper this morning. I don't think it really matters. I think Baylor's offense is an absolute joke, to be completely honest.
I agree. I bet Colorado.
Yeah, so did I. And for the data point, we'll give you a little snippet of betting you. It was 17-0 at the end of the first quarter against Utah, and Rising got hurt. You take that game away, they beat Tarleton State and Air Force, the carcass that is Air Force football. Just terrible. Which stack? Rourke and Surratt or Sorsby and Henderson? It would be the Cincy stack for me.
Same.
How risky on FanDuel is Jennings at 8K flat, getting so much of him in the Sims? I mean, he can really run, but I assume you're looking to run him naked?
I brought him down a little bit because I'm worried that the leash is going to be short.
Favorite QBs for cash games? We kind of talked about that.
Shug and Green.
Yeah. Am I still a believer in the Cleveland stack? Got to tune in tomorrow, but yes, I will have some Watson and Amare, and I will just be burning money. I think Njoku's out, so it makes
Jordan Aiken season.
Yeah. Thoughts on Neil from Kentucky?
Who?
Sorry? I think he means he's got to mean Kansas. He's got to mean Devin Neal.
Oh yeah, I think he's a solid GPP play.
Yeah, definitely. West Virginia's. I'm still a believer, but their defense is absolutely atrocious. Last thing here before we duck on out. The easiest thing I'm going to ask for. Let's take 5 of you, hit the like button. We're not leaving until we hit triple digits. Take 2 seconds, 4 of you to do it. And then we're going to bounce on out here again. Another good show in the books for our friends here at Stochastic. You guys are the best for tuning in, making this fun, letting me and Matt break down the slate and hopefully make some money for all of us here. But we are going to bounce on out. If you do have any questions, again, Jazzerhouse Bets, Matt_Gajewski, Mike behind the glass, powering the show, making it all go. Friends, thanks for tuning in. Look at that, over 100. You guys are the best in the business. I really hope we see some big time avatars at the top of these tournaments. But for me, for Matt, and for Mike, good luck. Enjoy your Saturday. Talk to you guys soon.